week 2 from my parents' basement in Denver, Colorado, having my morning coffee. How are you doing?
I am not in my parents' basement, so I'm doing great.
You're still in New York?
You
So
you've escaped your parents' basement though in
no, I
life.
don't. I
Like
don't. I
this,
don't live here. I do. I know digital nomad is a life of privilege that some of us in tech have. I'm not. I'm sort of a digital nomad, not by choice, but because I have a kid and I like to take her to see family members. So we spend a lot of time with in Denver, as I say many times on the show. If it were down to me, I would spend all of my life in Los Angeles and never leave that beautiful climate. But I end up having to go to very difficult to visit places like Denver and such.
in Las
So
Vegas, horrible Las Vegas.
that was a challenge. Vegas was tricky for the conferences a couple weeks ago. So I want to bring up an anecdote that's my background is data and journalism, right? That's kind of my
Hmm.
areas of specialty or whatever. So I often get these job postings sent to me that are like, the crossover between the two still, even though I'm very happy in my current job, not looking, but you open up the job postings and kind of take a look around. Anyway, I saw one last night that wasn't sent to me, but that just popped up on LinkedIn, that made me so happy that I work in tech and not in the journalism or data journalism world. So it was a posting. You'll think this is funny because you live in New York. It was a posting for basically a data job for the Wall Street Journal, audience strategist, right?
Hmm.
Requiring at least 7 years of newsroom experience, like really solid newsroom experience, but
Hmm.
also like pretty, significant data skills, Python, SQL, blah, blah, blah. Gives the salary range, which is good. Jobs are starting to give the
Hmm.
salary range. Guess what the starting point? And I know, like, salary, the
The
bars tend to be
starting
different.
point of the salary was, I'm gonna guess it
So not
was
not remote in New York.
70, 75,
65. I mean, like,
65.
so when I see these, I'm just like, thank God I left journalism. And, I'm because like
Yeah.
65K, I can guarantee you need not just 7 years experience, but probably a master's from Columbia University to even be considered for a role like that. And they expect someone to start possibly at 65K. Like, are you kidding
To
me?
be doing like data stuff though.
That they clearly say, yes, the data stuff, but also 7 years of newsroom experience in both data and
Right.
journalism.
So they want
Um,
they want someone who has the newsroom. They want someone who has the newsroom experience, who wants to transition into data, and then they're going to basically be like the internship, not the internship, but like the entry level into that. And it starts at 65. Now, the funny thing about the Wall Street Journal, that you mentioned it is like in its audiences, the Wall Street Journal notoriously is extremely hard to churn from. Like
hmm.
they're one of these companies out there, and I don't know if they've changed this recently. I used to be actually I still am a subscriber, probably because it's I haven't read it. I read it occasionally when a good article comes up or a bad one, but they make it very difficult to churn. Like it used to be, you had to like you couldn't you can go in and put your credit card in and
Hmm.
put your stuff in and start but if you want to churn, you have to like call a number, and someone's only working there between the hours of 3 and 3:07 p.m. on a Tuesday, and you got to like call them up, and it's impossible to churn, and they do it because it's so inconvenient to do that people are like, all right, like whatever, this is a pain in the neck, I'm just going to keep paying my monthly fee. And so I'm wondering how much of nothing against the Wall Street Journal, they used to do that, so do other companies, but interesting to
Well, it's,
see what
I
this
mean,
job would be, because I'm wondering if someone's doing the analysis on like, hey, if we make it hard for people to churn, how much of our audience stays, or
so
how much more revenue can we squeeze out of them as journalism dies.
yeah. No, all my takeaway is just like, thank God I'm out of that industry, because we're talking about layoffs all the time, and in tech, increasingly hitting maybe some data roles, but at the same time, all these headlines about media layoffs, and I just feel so much more secure where I am, and where
Oh yeah.
thank goodness they can make more than $65,000 a year. Can a professional, could anyone live with 65K in New York? other than with the, when you're starting out in your early 20s before you have.
Yeah, you can. You can. You can't have kids with that money. I mean, you can. People do it. It's hard to do. It's hard to save money doing that, but people do it. I don't know.
Yes.
A lot of these jobs are just made for trust fund kids. Is my
No,
spicy take on this stuff. So
no, absolutely. Which also explains the lack of diversity in newsrooms. So anyway, that's a tangent there that our guest probably wasn't expecting, but I know he's a big reader of the business press, so I'm sure he has thoughts on it. Let's bring him in, Vin Vashishta, who I've been following. He was one of my first kind of data people out in the business world I started following. Hi, Vin. Welcome.
How's it going? Thanks for having me.
You are calling in from Reno, right?
Reno, Nevada. Yes. Very sunny Reno, Nevada today.
Yeah. Well, welcome to the Tech Bros Show. I trust that you watch us all the time. I'm not sure that you do, but you share our ethos of kind of non BS take on what's happening in data and tech. And I'm about halfway through your book, which came out. Was it just last week that it came out?
Officially last week. The ebook released early for some reason at the beginning of June, and then this book came out about a week and a half ago. People started getting their copies. So
awesome!
Yeah.
Congratulations! So from data to profit, how businesses leverage data to grow their top and bottom lines. So when I read the title and dug into it, it kind of, to me, this book feels like in some ways just a summation of your take on data. So before we get to that, tell us, who you are and what you do, and then why you wrote this book.
Vin Vashishta, been in technology for over 25 years, data science and machine learning for over 11, started V Squared in 2012, before anyone knew what data science really was, me included. I had this kind of crazy notion that you could use data to understand your customers better. And that was sort of what propelled me forward. I tried to do some marketing use cases, but supply chain and manufacturing was way more interested in doing data. So spent the first year working with supply chain, worked into marketing, done a lot of work on the behavioral side, a lot of decision science, decision support systems, pricing models was another area. But I've done really almost every industry you can think of. I've worked in the data science field. And what I found out about 2014 was when I went to do interesting projects, they were expensive. So I had to get buy-in from increasingly senior level people who could sign these checks. And I had to learn how to talk to C-level leaders in a completely different way than I ever had before. So this was the beginning of From Data to Profit. It's figuring out how to, number one, explain it. And then number two, get it into production in a way that returned money to businesses. And at the time that I was talking about this, I was getting heckled by data scientists when I said things like, we are accountable for delivering value. We are accountable for revenue and cost savings. I got heckled. And that's sort of what made me double down on it, because in talking with C-level leaders, it was obvious, if you don't make cash with this, if it never makes it to production, if no one ever uses it, just all those fundamental things that a business should be doing right were completely missing from our field as we were sort of maturing. And that became the book. It also was really my consulting practice for the last 8 years, increasingly on the strategy side. And now I teach and advise and allegedly influential. I don't know if I have enough followers to really be considered. I think you got to have 1 million to really be an actual influencer. I think I'm like a micro or a nano or,
And you need your own show. Do you have a show? Maybe I just don't.
Nope.
Okay.
No, sometimes when I travel, I feel like I'm have my own show, but no, not yet.
Well, I'm super happy to have you and Lauren on stage or on screen together, because I think that business mindedness that to me seems like it should be obvious actually isn't when it comes to data. And I think, Lauren, you share that view, maybe like you express it in different ways than Vin does, but what's your take on it?
I just yell at things. That's what I do. No, it's well, Vin, let me ask, like, you said you've been doing this for 11 years, and data machine learning stuff specifically. Like, I mean, what are some of the biggest failures you had? Is it just like you know what the value is, you know what the requirements are, but then you just end up in this soup of like running through the tech stack, or like what does it all look like? Like where does this fail in your opinion? Like in your experience?
Where doesn't it fail? I think that's
It's hard. It's hard to do stuff right.
Well, it is, and especially with an emerging technology. Yeah, everyone's figuring out the technology, and at the same time, sort of building the business model next to it. And trying to do both at the same time is really difficult. So I'm not belittling anybody that's failed. I have repeatedly. But I think one of the biggest failures for me early on was working with actual like hard sciences, scientists, PhDs, people who looked at my model and, they're brilliant. They understood it, but they had a different perspective on it because for them, modeling was a well-established practice. Building models was a thing they did. They understood causal methods way better than I did at the time. And they beat some rigor into me because I would present a model to them and they would say, look, okay, great. So the data does that. That's awesome. Now prove it. And as but I modeled, I created this model. It learned, it trained, it tested, it 20%, 80%, and it did this accuracy and all these other numbers. And here you go. It's awesome. And they just kind of threw it back at me and said, well, okay, so that's a great hypothesis. Prove it. And it was that was one of my biggest failures, is working with scientists and having them throw it back and say, no, there's other stuff you have to do. It's not a model. It's not something I can use until you prove it. And that, I think, for me was the beginning of this long journey, realizing that, because as soon as you get through that, you get beyond the train, test, validate, ship mentality, you realize how expensive this stuff is to do it right.
Right.
And as soon as you get to that point, that's why I said, then I had to talk to CEOs because they're the only ones who can write checks that big. And so for me, that was sort of the two-sided realization. Number one, it's way harder than you think. Number two, there's more steps involved. Number three, it's expensive, and that means there has to be a business component to this. It's not just a cheap experimentation or an easy prototype. There's more in there. And I think for me, that was the failure. And it was sort of a cascading failure. One failure led to another, and sort of learned how to do this in a more rigorous way and then how to justify it.
Sure. What do you like? I don't know what the exact numbers are, but like every now and again, like it'll be like the MIT review or HBR, or someone will come out with you started laughing already, but like someone will come out with like, 66% of these projects fail, or 70% fail, and like my whole thing is looking at this in aggregate. It's like, well, if there's this high of a failure rate, why is there money that continues to get pumped into, experimentation and everything? Do certain companies think like, oh yeah, but like 70% fail, but that's those other companies. We're a good company here. We're gonna do it right. Like the failure rates are always like higher than 2/3 on these. I've seen them in the 80s and 70s, 60s. Like, what do you think about that as like, I don't know, as like an industry, or does that mean anything? Or is that just Harvard trying to get some clicks? Like, what do you think about all that?
I mean, it's all of the above. You notice who the people saying that the majority of these initiatives fail are, and they're people that are selling consulting services. And I'm guilty. I am one of them. I am a consultant. I can solve all your problems. And, if you're losing hair, I'm your guy. But that's part of the data science and AI problem. Is AI can do a ton. It can deliver a ridiculous amount of value. But, and of course there's always a but, it's not easy. It's not simple. It's not straightforward. It's not something that a company is going to succeed with through trial and error. That's where most companies go, is we'll pump money into it. We'll try until we figure out what works, and then billions of dollars will fall from the sky. And I joke about this being a 3-slide presentation. Slide 1, AI. Slide 2, completely blank. Slide 3, we're all billionaires. It's jet skis and the Bahamas and stuff like that. But somebody needs to be slide 2. So
it's like there's that whole meme. It's like step 1, name a thing.
Yeah.
Step 2, question mark, question mark. Step 3, profit.
Yeah, exactly. It's the underwear gnomes from South Park. Yeah. And that's where I came up with it. And I remember Joe Reese posted about it a while ago. And I read it. I was like, oh my God. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I made that joke too. It's interesting how a lot of us are figuring the same thing out, saying the same things, and we all came at it from different places. But I think that's, on the one side, it's assault with a deadly meme, but on the other side, it is trying to solve a problem that we haven't confronted yet, and that is to hold technology accountable. That's something that the C-level is extremely interested in doing. They want returns, and when they don't get it, they don't know how to hold their technology teams accountable. I've met C-level leaders who are afraid of their technology teams, and that's not the right relationship.
Flesh that out, because that's part of the book. What do you mean when you say hold? You said 2 things. You said hold the technology accountable, and then you said hold the technology teams, which are a little bit different. So what do you mean by both of those?
So the technology has to compete against other technologies. Companies are treating AI as if it is going to replace every other technology. No, it's not like that. We're not going to, because we think about digital transformation. We used to have hard-coded, hard records and files and paper, and we completely replaced a lot of that with digital transformation, with a computer screen that looks like the page used to. So that's the mindset that a lot of companies are going into. It is, okay, now AI is just going to replace all of my digital stuff. No, it isn't. Digital works for so many use cases, and it's so cheap. Why replace it? For a 3% increase, it's not worth it. There's no ROI there. And so the technology has to compete with other technologies. Data and AI manage complexity and reduce uncertainty better than any other technology. That's what they do. That's if you're looking at a use case where there's a lot of uncertainty, you need data. You probably need models. If you're looking for a use case where there's scale or complexity, you probably need machine learning. But other use cases, no, why replace? And so that's one component of, it's got to justify itself. It's got to have ROI. The other side is your team. Your data team should be delivering a ridiculous amount of value. If they're not, something's wrong. And it's not always your data team's full of, dumb people. It's not. They're smart. They know what they're doing. It's not always they're led by incompetence. No, a lot of data teams are really, really great leadership. But it's a bigger than technology problem. You're putting data professionals into roles that they are not prepared for. They're willing to take a swing at it because that's sort of an engineering credo. I've never been a product manager, but I'll take a look anyway. And that's really what a lot of data teams are doing right now, is they're being pulled into product management, strategist, but no one's prepared them for what that really means. And we're different in that we have data. And so in some cases, we understand the business better than the business understands itself. And we have this unique position where we can speak authoritatively, even though we don't fully understand what's going on. And that gets us into a lot of trouble.
So without putting the blame on data professionals, because again, most are highly trained and very specific skills. But what you're saying is that I guess I know you have some courses that get at this, that you can't just, probably in any business, any company, as a data professional, unless you're maybe in the biggest tech companies where each person is in a very narrow lane. Like, as a data professional, you need to be more strategic and more business minded.
Well, I think our field is so young that we don't have people in the business who are really data literate or AI literate or machine learning literate, whatever you want to call it. We don't have people that understand the paradigm very well. Like with digital, a lot of people that are in the C-suite have spent 20 years using digital technology, so they have an implicit understanding of it. We don't have that with data science. And so you're, as a data professional, in a bit of an extended position where you need to understand the business well enough to meet it halfway. But we also need new roles. Like, we can't pretend every data scientist is going to become suddenly an expert in the business and the domain. They're going to have domain knowledge. They're going to develop business acumen. They're going to learn how to speak to C-level leaders. But we can't pretend like they're going to somehow magically take over product management, or they're going to somehow magically become strategists. That's not what they want to do. There's a good percentage. I mean, I've got a lot of people that take my class, but there's a good percentage that want to, but the majority don't. They want to do data science. They want to work with the data, work with the technology. And we keep saying, well, everyone has to. No, we need new roles. And that's part of what the book is designed to do, is put everybody on the same playbook. Because what we seem to do really badly is alignment, where the entire business operates and moves forward from one playbook. We do that really badly. And so that was the purpose of the book, is anyone at any level can read this. And no matter how business literate you are, this will help you understand the business's challenges. And no matter how data or AI literate you are, this will help you understand how to solve some of the business problems associated with monetizing data, monetizing AI, getting it into production in the first place, figuring out how to turn it into a product, getting people to use it.
What's an example of whether it's a company or an individual where a CEO or a business leader has really, taken on this data strategy, technology mindset that you need to have to be successful right now?
In the book, I often refer to Satya Nadella, Microsoft CEO.
Mm-hmm.
He is a technical strategist, and he's done this better than anyone else that I've seen. He did it. He really learned the tough lessons with Azure and brought those to bear to really lay the groundwork for AI at Microsoft. And he has really the two sides of the house, where he understands from a business perspective what has to happen in order to support AI, but then also from a technology standpoint. I mean, he was really smart looking at Microsoft research and saying, we're not producing, a generative model that's comparable to what we're watching OpenAI develop. Let's just put some money into them. And that's what they made an early bet in 2019. And it was really that forward-looking prescriptive view of the technology and saying, I have no idea when this is going to show up, when it's going to be ready. I'll bet you at the beginning of 2022, if you'd ask him, when are you going to be delivering Copilot for Word or Excel, he just said, watch my hands. I don't think he would have known, but he knew it was going to happen. And so he made space in the Office 365 suite. He made space in Power BI. He made space in what was becoming Fabric. He made space for something he knew would show up eventually. And when it did, he had everything in a line to implement and really monetize the technology. That's the best I've seen it done, where it was just that balancing act of, here's the business side of it, here's this big uncertainty, here's the technology side of it, and we're going to align it in such a way that when it happens, we're going to profit from it. We're going to be in a good position. And that's what I talk about when I say continuous transformation, is getting ready for this sort of future that's inevitable, that the obvious top points, but at the same time, you don't have a crystal ball. You can't say it's going to happen in 6 months or it's going to happen in 18 months. And so you have to have a business that, we talk about agility, but we don't explain how to do that. How do you make your business innovative? How do you make your business agile? And how do you avoid some of the mistakes that Google's made, where they have really thrown innovation out there but not been able to monetize it? They constantly shut down these great projects that people love, then they make them disappear. You see the black van show up, they put a bag over a product line and you never see it again. It's just, we need to get better at delivering cash and products and supporting them. but the business does too. We can't just blame the data team. It's really, if you don't start with strategy and if you're not willing to learn about the technology, why are you at the C-level? Move aside for someone who is. And that's why I say Satya is a great example, because he really embraces both sides. He's a technologist who's embraced the strategy and the business side of it. And he's also someone with exceptional business savvy who's embraced the technology.
Yeah. So on that note of, I always, since you use the example of Microsoft here, like they invested $1 billion into OpenAI, I think in 2019, and then, put in another huge investment recently of like 10 billion or so. Microsoft is selling, the compute and everything that this is going to be run on, right? So they're in the best position. What does so for that example of Satya makes total sense, because in the supply chain of how this is delivered, more than there's three or four companies, there's Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and Oracle that can really own this compute and everything on the supply chain here. But what is your
don't say
average
Oracle
CEO?
can own this? That would scare me.
Yeah. Oracle.
I used to code in Java. I remember. I still have scars.
I threw them in there to be nice, but no, I'm actually, I don't know. I'm more bullish on Oracle than most people are. But my point here is, what is your CEO of Kraft Heinz? How are they going to do AI? Or your CEO of, I don't know, a fertilizer company that is based in Iowa, and they do $500 million a year in revenue. Good company, solid company, but not really in this game. Like, what are the differences in the C-suite at tech companies versus companies that are not tech companies?
Well, I think McDonald's. I like McDonald's, and I use them in my class for product management, because McDonald's CEO called absolute BS on data science a few years back. Said this is trash. We're revamping the way that we do things. We are walking back a lot of our transformation. We are refocusing on revenue. We're going to do core business, and dear data team, figure out how to integrate or go away. So that was, and I love that. I want more CEOs to challenge their data teams. And when you look at a McDonald's, they're selling cheeseburgers. Nobody wants a side of reporting. So you have to think about data and AI differently when you can't just, bundle it into something your customer's buying. And I think that's sort of the cheat that a lot of companies are doing right now, is they have some digital product, and so they're just slapping data on it and charging $10 more a month and saying we're an AI first company. And it's just, it's not how it works. With a company like McDonald's or your fertilizer company, you have to figure out, okay, what can we actually get out of this? And that's why I like McDonald's approach to it. They just said, look, we're not getting anything out of this. We looked at the ROI, it's not there. And I think that's the step one. The first step is to realize that a lot of the hype around data science and machine learning is exactly that. If you're a McDonald's or if you're a fertilizer company, you're not going to slap, reporting on your fertilizer. But if you think about how data can help your customers, okay, now we've got to start talking about workflows. What does my customer do with my fertilizer? How do I make that better with AI? Well, that's kind of difficult. And that's where the problems start. You start looking at what they do, and they want some sort of information on effectiveness. They want some sort of information on when to what. And if you look at the workflow, you begin to see, it's those two themes I was talking about: complexity, uncertainty. What are they uncertain about? What do they not know? What questions do they have that they don't know they can get answers to? And then, do you as a company have access to data that can help them answer that question better? Do they plant, across 500 acres and there is some scale or complexity issue that's your fertilizer. And so you begin to see the challenge, because do you have access to that part of the workflow? No. I give you this bag, you walk away. Do I gather any data about how you use that bag? I have no idea. And as a business, that should scare you to death. I have no idea what my customer is doing with my product. Yeah, I know they're using it on their field, but is that really enough information about, that's where you begin to realize, there's more to this. We don't have to just settle for the data that we have right now. We can be smart about new data generating techniques and serve customers in ways that they want us to. Because I use John Deere as the example. They, rolled out autonomous trucks and autonomous farm vehicles and vehicles that were connected, and they were, doing data updates and all this other, and farmers didn't want it. They actually created a secondary market for their equipment because farmers didn't want to buy new, they want to buy the stuff without the technology. And it's that disconnect. It's like, don't force it on your customers. Figure out what your customers need, what they want, and give that to them. See what you can do to deliver the value they care about. And I think that is where the CEO has to live, is number one, saying, look, value up front, not after the fact. Don't tell me in 2 years. Tell me, in 6 weeks, what do we got? What am I going to have?
So back in 2019, I think, before I studied data or was in the data world, I was briefly selling cars at Lexus of Beverly Hills, and got to dive into all their data systems. So it was my first time working in a few different CRMs, amazing stuff, learned a lot, and just got a sense of how data works in a large corporation. Their supply chain management. It was shocking to see that, a car leaves Japan, and by the time it arrives at the port in Los Angeles, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's not a lot of knowledge about where those cars are, how long it's going to take. So I saw sort of the good and the bad of data. Salespeople have access to an enormous amount of data that can inform how they sell the cars. From what I saw, 99% of the salespeople don't actually ever look at that, right? Because they're not trained to be data driven. The one thing that really worked, Lexus had a chatbot. This was 2019. I don't know how they got it so good, that customers would go onto the website, and they liked the chatbot so much that they connected with her. Her name was Morgan. And repeatedly, people would come in and say, I need to talk to Morgan. Morgan told me what I need and told me it's available and the colors and everything. And it took me a while to catch on, oh, wow, this is the chatbot. And I eventually went and played around with Morgan, and the speed with which she gave information and everything was incredible. So, to me, that was an example of how, in a business, you have to get a sense of the data product that might be driving value could be the one that's the least expected, right? Again, this was a pre-OpenAI chatbot that actually was getting customers in, creating that sense of, almost like a human relationship and driving the sales much more than, all this incredible other data that we had about products and customers. So,
well, that's understanding your customer workflow. It's really, and you're looking for an opportunity to serve them in a way that you couldn't before. You have a ton of customers who don't like calling in, talking to a salesperson. They don't, that for them is a barrier. And so creating a chatbot interface for them, you just look at the workflow and you say, this serves a customer segment that we weren't able to serve before. We are making it less painful for a group of customers to get their questions answered, to engage with the product. And we're using data that we have. It's very simplistic data, inventory, helping just really understand what the car does, access to a knowledge base. And these are all generative AI use cases that any company today can now pursue, and pursue very easily, because you either understand your customer workflow and their needs, and how the technology can fit into and service those use cases, and you have an advantage, or you don't. That's where I say CEOs have to sort of come forward and figure it out. Data teams have to meet them halfway, figure out how they can start bringing opportunities forward but talk about value, not technology, so that they sort of take some of the burden off their CEOs and their CXOs so that they don't have to become data scientists themselves. But at the same time, they have to understand the technology. It's not a magic bullet. It's only going to work for some things. And that was a great example, perfect use case. It's a company that understands their customer, sees needs that aren't being met, and deploys technology to do that.
But again, a massive global corporation that has the means to do so, where I feel like a lot of what we're saying here is still like not the reality for an awful lot of businesses, right? Again, like lower end companies you're going into, not that you're not also going into bigger companies, but say medium size companies, smaller companies that are still wrapping their heads around, data infrastructure, period.
Yep.
Like how do we, let's be realistic. How many of these are really ready to take on AI? Should they be seeing AI as should companies be looking at, we have to have data and we have to have AI as sort of two separate things?
I mean, they are. The AI doesn't work without data. I think that's one of the reveals that I give to clients a lot of the time. Yeah, it doesn't work without data. So if the data is trash, the AI is trash. Doesn't matter how cool the model is. You can only increase the quality of data so much with a cool model. So there's the component of data gathering, data generation, and maturing your capabilities to not just gather data, but begin to track back to the process that generates it, and then begin to control.
When most companies that I've seen are so far from having that proper data infrastructure that's going to lead to the proper data generation, the proper data quality.
I get it.
There's not. How can we at all be optimistic that any of them are ready to?
They're not.
I think you got to throw money behind it. Like you got to make money and you got to make a mandate. And you got to finance the project, right? Because there's AI use cases that are, I don't know, internal to the business that a customer of the business would never see. And then there's, like your chatbot example, Mary, which is like, it's literally the customer's experience chatting, with the brand, which is totally different than, slapping AI on top of your dashboards and saying like, hey, how much revenue, where do our best customers come from? And then, your AI to SQL says, well, your best customers come from California. And all right, well, why is that? Oh, well, they have the most revenue because they're the biggest state. Right? There's different, it's regarding customer facing AI use cases versus internal use cases. Vin, where do you think companies should start? Should they be releasing stuff to customers before they've tested the waters out internally, or does that even matter? Like, what do you think about that?
I think that, kind of a bunch of points here to go to. Yeah, you do need to invest in it. When you said you need to throw money at it, yes, and get behind it. Don't just be passive about it and say, here's a budget, go get it. If you're at the C level, you need to be a sponsor. Every data team needs a C-level leader and C-level sponsors. You need sort of this coalition. It's one of the things I talk about in the book. You need a track record of success. You need a coalition. Track record of success, internal, lower risk to start with. You have an easier time getting people to adopt. You can make some mistakes that you can't make public facing. You can learn how to deploy and support in lower risk environments if you do things internally. But some companies have such huge opportunities and such passionate customer communities that you can make some mistakes with them. And you could find early adopters who have a big enough problem to be your sort of alpha group and work out the kinks with you, because the thing, even flawed, the product that you're delivering, even flawed, is such a powerful solution for them that they're willing to put up with it. We see that time and time again as a successful avenue forward. And so there's sort of two approaches that you can take, but it's a learning process. And companies don't realize that. Like, you're not going to show up tomorrow and be an AI first business. it's an iterative process. You've got to get your data in order. You have to get the talent necessary, not only to deploy the model, but to support it, to continuously improve it. You have business problems to solve as well as technology problems to solve. And sort of that's the next level to really talk to when you say, well, what about those small and mid-sized businesses? I mean, do you want to be in business in 3 years? If you do, giddy up. Get to it. You don't have a lot of time left. Your competitors aren't sitting there waiting for you to catch up. They're jumping ahead. They're experimenting. They're figuring it out. They're continuously improving. They're not going through the hype motions. They're actually trying to figure out how to deploy product. They're getting cost savings and revenue. And you start to see this, in larger tech companies. We're already seeing this. If you look at the way that Intel executes versus the way NVIDIA is executing, NVIDIA is out executing Intel. And you look at it just comparatively between the two, and you have to ask yourself, why? It's not because Intel's leadership team isn't top notch. They are. It's a great leadership team. I mean, pretty much anyone you ask will say, yeah, Intel has a pretty good leadership team. They're one of the best out there. They have the domain knowledge. They know what they're doing. They have a long-term plan. Why aren't they executing? And you begin to look at the way that the two companies use data and how successful they've been at adopting and understanding the paradigm. And you begin to see where the segmentation is. You look at companies like Apple that had great success managing supply chain disruptions. And then you look at Nike and you look at Target. So you begin to see this stratification. And that's where we're going. It starts with very large businesses, very mature businesses, but this is going to filter down very quickly to SMEs. Some are figuring it out. The rest are talking about how hard it is. If you're one of those who's just talking about how hard it is, you won't be around in 2 to 3 years. So what is it going to take? Yeah, it's going to take transformation. It's going to take commitment. It's going to take investment. But if you don't start now, you're done. I say this over and over again. We're going to lose maybe half of our businesses to this because those companies that are falling behind today, like there's no way to catch up. You can't catch up fast enough. You can't buy your way back to parity. So you either start now or, close the doors. It's that kind of a moment for companies where, figure it out. I hate to be cruel that way, but figure it out or, find a job someplace else.
What's the easiest way to get started then? I'm listening to this podcast. I'm a viewer out there. I'm like, Vin's scaring me. What's step one then?
Obviously, call me.
Of how? Yeah, right. Right. No, but like, what should? What
1-800 don't let your company die.
Right.
1-800 Vin.
Yeah. Mary and I get 10%.
Yeah, exactly. Commission,
what's the best way to get started then with any of this? Like, do I find a company that has a packaged product? Do I have someone go look through my data stack? Like, what do I do? I'm the CEO of a mid-sized business, and you're scaring me.
Strategy. Start with strategy. Don't pretend this is something weird. Don't pretend this is something, with 8 tentacles. It's not. It's the same as anything else your business has ever dealt with. This is the same thing. It's technology, it's complexity, but you've probably had complexity come at you from other directions before. So just think about this as another business problem. Don't think about it as a generative AI problem. Don't think about it as a data problem. Don't go to tactics. Don't do all of the dumb things that people tell you to do and call it an AI strategy. That's not. Figure out where your opportunities are. If you can't do opportunity discovery, find someone who can help you do that. Look at your core strategic goals and figure out where your opportunities to leverage data, analytics, advanced machine learning, AI, where are the opportunities? And again, back to those two categories, complexity, uncertainty. If you're looking at a use case where there is complexity or uncertainty, you are looking at a data science, machine learning, analytics, whatever use case. And that's an opportunity. Find those opportunities. There's top down, the big ones, and you got bottom up, those incremental improvements. And then go to your data team and do something you've probably never done before, which is bring them problems. Don't say use generative AI. Say, here's my business problem. I've got customers, Mary, in your use case, I got customers. They're coming to the website. They're not comfortable calling, and they're just going away. I don't know how to keep them. What could we do? Don't say I want a chatbot. Don't say I want AI. Don't say I want a report. Just say, here's my business challenge. What can you do for me? And that's step one, because now you're treating your data team like a strategic partner. And they're going to, and then it's, trust them. They're going to tell you, we have to have the data to support. We have to have infrastructure. We have to have all of these things. And now, again, treat it like a business problem. Is there ROI? Can I justify the costs? And you'll need to bring in new talent. You'll need to bring in people who can build out a data and AI strategy. You'll need to bring in people who can explain pricing and monetization. That's the product side of it. Who can do the productization, commercialization components of this. You'll need people to lead this team.
So ultimately, I don't mean to cut you off, but would you say your advice is the same as it would have been a year ago in the pre-generative AI world, only with more urgency now?
Yes. Start with the business problems. Start with your customers' problems. If you start with the technology, all you'll end up with is more technology. Start with strategy. Strategy should lead technology. When it doesn't, when technology leads strategy, all you get is technology. Strategy is that connection to value. If you don't start with business goals, you end up with technology that maybe you can monetize, maybe you can't. So I would say approach this like you have any other business challenge. Start with the strategy. And if you don't have, the AI literacy or the data literacy at the C level, bring in a partner. Bring in maybe a new person into the C-suite. Bring in an advisor. There's tons of ways to tackle this problem. But you need knowledge at the C level. You need people at the C level who understand the technology and who can help you identify opportunities. And then translate those opportunities to the rest of the business. You need someone who creates a strategy, one overarching strategy for the business. So the entire enterprise is going in one direction, not 18. It's just like every other strategic problem the business has faced in its history. Look at it as definitely a sense of urgency. You're going to do things differently. You're going to execute differently. Business strategy is fundamentally different now because you have technology as a core pillar of strategy. So you need to change and you need some new frameworks to accommodate that. But this is still a strategy problem. This is still a C-level, needs to be involved, needs to be engaged, needs to be literate and aware. So don't treat this like it's a Martian. It's not. This is more business.
So Lauren, what's your take? Because part of what you do is tell companies, in some ways you're spending too much on data, certainly on data tooling. Do you share Vin's point of view on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I share the same point of view. I mean, we're talking in broad terms here, but most of these data teams that we're talking about today mostly are just, plugging one thing onto another thing and then one other thing onto another thing. And their careers are incentivized by knowing, how to use Maven with Spark or how to use, blah, 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 blah. And, there's not a lot of strategy on a lot of these teams, to be frank. So, yeah, I think there's a huge opportunity. It's either retraining or get out.
Yeah.
This is my opinion on it.
Resume-driven development.
Oh, yeah. It's never been worse, in my opinion. Other people will tell me, it's been worse at other times, and I can see arguments. I think the last 2 or 3 years has never been worse. It's just towers of Babel to nowhere, like all over the place. At companies that do $30 million a year top line or something on low margin, I don't know. I could go on and on. But if anyone in the audience has questions, we got a couple of minutes here. feel free to put in your questions about anything you want to ask Vin or any of us.
Yeah,
Happy to
let's
take
say hi to a
turns.
few people. Scott says Mark Palmer has a great post about managing a data literacy program within an organization. So he linked to that. Anne Stoltzman from Rivian. Hi, Anne. She says yes to everything. Stop saying I want the shiny thing. Chris Brousseau. Hi, Chris. He says crazy how much money needs to be spent on things the customer never sees. Val Goldine says you can say that again. People want AI, or companies want AI, but still very much live in the dark ages of data. That's kind of what I was trying to say, but you said it much better, Val. Hello also to Christian. Who else is on here? Joe Reese, of course, who is writing in from Lauren's mom's basement. I'm thinking that's an inside joke, or maybe he really is in your mom's basement. I don't know.
Joe, I was at your mom's basement this morning, so good pancakes she made for me.
There you go.
Throw one right back at you, Joe.
And hi also to Chase and How. I think we got everybody there. So
we've got
saying hi to people in the comments throughout the show because we had such a
wait, since everybody's in somebody's mom's basement, does that mean y'all are like Reddit mods too? Is that I mean that's kind of a requirement.
No. Reddit's all over the place. It's really the replatforming, I think, right now going on with content.
It's wild.
And so, let me ask you, Vin. Like you wrote a book. That's content, right? You also have a presence on LinkedIn and elsewhere. Like, what do you think about like how content? Like everyone's like, oh, content's gonna get commoditized and all the little like I don't know low latency type things like just shooting out tweets. AI is gonna like take that over, but like there's still gonna be room for like writing books and stuff. Like, what do you think about all that and what people are saying about how AI is gonna change how content is made? Not just content about AI, but in general.
Generative AI is going to do something similar here that it's going to do in many other places. It's going to make all the stuff people shouldn't have been doing in the first place painfully obvious. It's going to make all of the really low effort stuff really obvious, because if AI can do it, I mean, this is going to be the question that's going to start popping up again and again and again. If generative AI can handle this, how hard was it in the first place? Should we have had people doing it this way in the first place? So when you look at it passing the bar exam, or passing, an exam to get into med school, or passing like a CCNA certification test, when you begin to see a model that's really not that bright, when you dig into it, it's really not that bright, but it's a great memorizer. You'll begin to ask yourself, okay, if generative AI can pump out this content, if it could have written this book, well, then you probably didn't say anything worth saying. You just gave me variations on a theme, and they aren't original variations on a theme. And I think what we're going to realize with content is the reason why there's so much of it is because most of it's trash. Most of it is low effort, low quality. And this construct that you have to have an original thought in order to publish has sort of gotten trampled. And that's where I think we're going to get back to. So here's all the lame content that we shouldn't have been writing in the first place because we don't need people for this anyway. To those people being able to refocus and writing better stuff. This is going to force you to either get out of writing because it wasn't for you in the first place, or increase your ability and increase your focus on creating high quality, original thought type content, teaching people something new, introducing a perspective that has not been explored in the past. And I think that's where we go with content.
I agree with that on the writing for sure. I'd say the opposite with images, right? Where, the AI generated art is coming out of, art that's been created by artists doing amazing work, always being underpaid for it. And now they're totally screwed over. Which gets to, you don't agree that they're.
When you look at the great artists, they did something different. And the reason why we didn't have more great artists isn't because everyone couldn't do what they did. I think we underestimate people. We say, oh, that person was a generational genius. No, I think a lot of us are just allowed to skate by doing the bare minimum and not truly taking our capabilities to where they could go. And if you're going to pay me $800,000 a year to write cartoons, I'm going to write cartoons. And if you're going to pay me, $20 million a year to act in Thor 46 or Rocky 90, well, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write that or I'm going to act in it. But if you say, look, generative AI can do that, so that's being pumped out, what do you got? Now you're forcing someone who loves art, because most people who are artists love it. There's passion, but they have to play a game because it's whatever's in demand. But if you take that away, and now you, in order to be an artist, have to be someone who brings something new that generative AI can't. That's what's uniquely human. We can synthesize what we've seen before and build something new. Generative AI isn't there yet. And so we still have a really big advantage. And what generative AI is going to do is force us to do it.
I agree with most of that. I mean, everything, all the content, so much content, and we used the word influencer, I think, before. Or maybe it was in a minute that we chatted before the show. But all of this influencer stuff right now is all based on getting the most follower counts possible. Yep. And by having the most follower counts, you have to say the most generic, Barbie, the movie Barbie's coming out, and there's that Barbie Oppenheimer meme going around. But you have to say the most pink plastic, I have to put down Barbie, but you have to say the most goo goo gaga butt kissy type stuff even. And then everyone will be like, yes. And then you watch these, the like buttons and how different thoughts and memes and trends occur. And it's all based on people aren't saying anything original. They're saying, I don't know, how many times can someone, we all work in the data tech space. How many times can someone write another blog post or another LinkedIn post about, here are the 5 ways to get started with data. Number 1, learn SQL. Number 2, stakeholder engagement. You're going to be doing, talking to stakeholders, and you're going to be using SQL to get data out to them. And it's been said a million times already. A million times it's been said. But anytime someone puts this out, it goes, and they get 10,000 people who were yes on it. And I don't know, I think that this whole button thing, I'm curious. I haven't seen anyone write stuff on this yet about where the like button is going on any platform.
Well, I think at some point the real measurement comes when you realize that likes don't pay. You've never,
right.
If you get 10,000 likes, that doesn't translate into $10,000.
Although it might on Twitter now soon. We haven't seen the paychecks come out yet.
I've seen some 30-cent tweets that are a little snarky about getting that 30-cent check. Thanks, Elon. But no, I think what you really realize quickly is that likes don't monetize unless you go into that top 1%.
Right.
And so if you really want to monetize a social media presence, you have to do different things and you have to explore different behaviors. And I think that is what will force us, is this combination of, number one, generative AI can do all that cheap stuff. So getting 10,000 likes isn't going to be valuable to anybody anymore because I can create a bot that does that. So now we've taken the stupid away. Generative AI is now handling stupid for us. So what's left for you? And I think that's the challenge. And it's not just people, it's businesses. Okay, generative AI is going to do a whole lot of really generic stuff. What do you got? What do you have above and beyond, GPT-4 or Claude or Falcon or any of the other, pick one of the other 100 models that are out there. What do you got that's better than that? And they're going to realize it's data. That's one competitive advantage. Back down to people. If you have people who don't know how to use the technology, if you have people that don't know how to build it, deploy it, support it, well, you don't have anything. And those become your competitive advantages. It is the people who can monetize, the people who can build a strategy, the people who can be forward-looking and prescriptive and work with these tools to do things that others can't. So this is really, as far as people are concerned, sort of taking a lot of the garbage work off the table and saying, so what do you got? Who are you? What can you bring to the conversation that's original, that's uniquely human? What can you do?
That's a good ending note. I think this is officially our longest show. We are over time, and I think we've just barely scratched the surface. I wanted to end on the question of ethics behind all of this. We're not going to get to that. I'm less bullish than both of you on the I'm feeling for the artists now. But we'll have you back on to get more into it, or in the comments. Thanks to everybody who watched. This was fantastic. And yeah, you're a tech bro now. Come back on anytime, Vin. This was fantastic.
Thank you.
And of course,
and where can people find your book? Is it on Amazon?
It's on Amazon. Wiley put it everywhere. I mean, it's like Frank's Red Hot. You can find it any place. It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Google Books, Apple Books, everything. There's some places that are uniquely Canadian that I can't remember, and for the UK, and I'm sorry. But if you go to datascience.vin, you'll find everything about me.
And they can check out your courses too. I haven't taken one, but I learn from you all the time on LinkedIn. We'll keep learning, and appreciate the time.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Great conversation.
Take care, everybody. Bye.
Bye.